The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Yes, coming to you cordless, everybody. It's Tuesday, January 16th, 2024, and it's 11:02 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States, 8:02 p.m. on the West Coast, 2 minutes after 2 p.m. in the afternoon in Sydney, Australia, and here where I'm sitting in Enon Omar's district in Northeast Minneapolis, it's 2 minutes after 10 p.m., and welcome to this, another edition of Jim Peters at Night. I am Jim Peters, and this is episode number 72. Yeah, we did it. Now, it just occurred to me at the end of this month, I'm taking a week off at the end of the month. We're doing a show on Monday, the 29th, and we're coming back on Tuesday, February 5th. So I'm taking a whole week off, even though we're doing a Monday show. And that will be our 6-month anniversary, that show on Monday. And we'll have done exactly, unless something goes wrong here, which it did last week, but it'll be exactly 80 episodes for 6 months, which is not too bad since we do 4 shows a week here. That's about par for the course, pretty much. So you're wondering, oh, what we got going on? I got to do the announcements. What am I talking about? Jesus, it's like I got to do announcements. I gotta thank and acknowledge our new sponsor, Conk News at conk.com. And here's their big fat logo right there. It's the best single news aggregator on the internet, period. You go to conk.com. They update the news from 75 different sources every 3 hours. And they use the pictures in the articles and the original headlines, and there's no interstitial pages, none of that bullshit. It's like it's a news junkie's paradise. And later on the show, we'll look at the front page in real time at Con News too. So I want to thank them. So what do we got going on tonight? Our guest is David Strom, the Associate Editor at hotair.com. We pre-recorded this afternoon. We have a wonderful time, him and I. Hold on a second. I gotta fix some stuff here. Yeah, always. It's always a pleasure to have him on. Now, it sounds like I'm shilling for Salem Media Properties. I'm not. I don't get paid if they're not a sponsor, but we have a lot of people on from there because, man, they're good writers. Jazz Shaw was on last week. David's on tonight. Next Tuesday, David's boss and Jazz's boss too, Ed Morrissey, is going to be on here for the first time. He's the editor-in-chief of Hot Air. And tomorrow night, Jennifer Oliver O'Connell will be here. She's part of the dynamic duo with Jeff Meyer from Conk News. She's on redstate.com. That's a Salem Media property too. So yeah, they're cleaning up, man. And actually, they're not doing too badly. I'm going to reference this. We talked about this at the end of the interview with David today about the fact that, and I've been meaning to bring this up for quite a while because I'm obsessed with the media because I'm involved in the media, especially the broadcast media. But Washington Post is not doing well. They've lost like 100,000 subscribers in like 3 months. They've laid off like 200-300 people, and it appears. I mean, right now it looks like if Bezos doesn't pump any, Jeff Bezos owns it, and this has to be pointed out here. Amazon doesn't own Washington Post. Jeff Bezos personally owns the Washington Post. He paid for it personally. It's his own money. It's his own deal. If he doesn't pump some money into serious money into this in the next few months, there's a possibility this publication might fold. What has it been around 150, 200 years? But they are not doing well at all. The New York Times is still like the paper of record. And David and I talk about this too. And the thing is, and this is kind of what I want to talk about before we run the interview. The New York Times is still kind of the paper of record, and also it's still kind of the last bastion for liberal news media in the United States. Now, David pointed this out, but he didn't have to, because I pointed this out previously on this broadcast. I brought this up to him about the fact that there's numerous studies. Basically, all the studies ever done on this says conservatives are more well-informed than liberals. And you're thinking, oh, that's just bias. And, well, there's an actual reason for that that's grounded in common sense, and that is the vast majority of the mainstream media is liberally biased, and that's no bullshit. And that's the reason, because the last survey I saw from a couple weeks ago, I mean, these come out like every 6 months or a year or something like that, and said that 96% of all reporters in America are Democrats. So that no, excuse me, 90%, because 6% of them are unaffiliated and 4% of them are conservatives. So yeah, so there you go. 90% are liberal, 4% are conservatives, and then the other 6 are just kind of like hanging around. So you wonder, okay, so it's obvious that's the reason for the liberal bias, which is you can argue, well, is it unconscious or is it deliberate? And then, because of what happened last night the Iowa caucuses, I can make a real good argument now. Well, now that's deliberate. Maybe in the years that passed, it wasn't. But the reason the reasoning goes to why conservatives are more informed is that we can't escape the liberal media. We just can't. It doesn't matter. You asked me, do I read the New York Times? Not anymore. I don't read it anymore. Do I stumble into articles during my daily search for news? Absolutely. I do. I will go over there. I'll look at stuff. It's mostly behind a paywall. And so because of that, I can't read a lot of it, but still I will go over there. I'll see it. I know what's going on there. But the thing is, I can't escape it. Whereas if you're in the liberal bubble, you can make an argument that we're in the conservative bubble here. But the liberal bubble is so pervasive, liberals never have to look at conservative media ever. Unless you go to Breitbart, or Hot Air or Red State or Town Hall, you don't see this shit. You don't. Whereas we see it all the time. We can't escape from it. And that's that's the primary reason conservatives are more informed than liberals. And the other thing is, and David brought this up too, and I've talked about this here on the show in the past too, about the fact that because of that, liberals have a literally distorted view of reality. This is the very example. I'm not talking on school here. This was at the end of the interview with David. He brings this up about the fact that, and I can't remember, he talks about the Skeptics Research Center, but I don't know if they actually did this survey, and I think this might have been Rasmussen. I'm not sure. Anyway, major survey done of liberals and conservatives, news readers, people, the public. All right, here's the question. How many, and I think this was 2021, if I'm right. I know it was 2023. The numbers aren't in for that yet. It was either 2021 or 2022, definitely after the George Floyd riots. Question: how many unarmed black men are shot by police in America every year? Okay, that's the question. Now, it's kind of a trick question because they use the word unarmed. So are they talking about no guns or no weapons of any kind? And I'll get to that in a second. That's kind of built into the answer. So they asked this question of the public. Conservatives said 50 to 100. The average Democrat, the average liberal said about 1,000, and some said 10,000, and even a few said 100,000. And the answer, depending on how you parse the question and whether you're talking about all weapons or just guns, the answer is under 32. So that's the thing. It depends on how you want to define a weapon, but there's no answer above 32. 32 men were shot by police. Unarmed black men were shot by police in the United States in 2021, I think it was. 32. That's the entire country, federal, state, and local, The answer is 32, and most Democrats will tell you about 1,000. Yeah, this goes on constantly. And then the thing is, like, here I'm sitting here in liberal America, and I don't bring this up with my friends anymore. If I bring this up, people say, well, where do you get your sources? Now, I have to tell you, the source for that number is the Washington Post criminal database. It's about a left-leaning publication as you can get. That's the source for that number. And the Washington Post criminal database is basically the gold standard in the United States for logging criminal. I was going to say criminal crimes, but that's like redundant, right? So the other thing I was telling David, and this is important about the fact, so like I mentioned, Conk News is a sponsor of this program now, and I really appreciate it. I used to work there. I was the editor in chief of Conk News for 3 years, and I took that job in 1990, uh, in 2020. 2020. Matter of fact, it was just before the start of the pandemic, basically. February, and I marked the start of the pandemic as Saturday, March 10th, 2020. Then the one thing, I was telling David this, and he agreed with me totally, and you'll hear this in a minute, about how what I didn't know. I mean, I've been kind of cynical, as I gotten older. But what I didn't know, shortly after I took that job, I started to find out how much the frickin' government lies about everything. Politicians lie through their teeth. You don't know. I mean, and this is one of the reasons I do this show, is because you, dear viewer, you don't know shit. They are lying to you and lying to you and lying to you, and they will lie some more. It's disgusting. And I would say they lie about a lot of stuff they don't even have to lie about. That's the terrible thing. I mean, I understand self-interest, and then there's a quote unquote national security. There's that. And the thing is, I've told you this. I've been studying the UFO phenomenon for 30 years, and I figured out 30 years ago that the UFOs are real. I couldn't tell you about aliens or any of that sort of shit, but I knew the UFOs are real flying machines. I knew that. Why? Because there's hundreds of government documents that talk about it. Hundreds. And you're thinking, well, and the obvious question is, well, why hasn't this ever made the press? And my answer is, that's a damn good question. I do not know. And the only thing I can think of, and this is partially documented, I brought this up many times on the show, but it really bears repeating. In the 1970s, I think starting in 1971, the CIA started a project called Operation Nightingale. And what Nightingale did is Nightingale paid off the 400 most prominent journalists in the United States to either misrepresent or misreport stories or not report them at all, depending on what they said. Now, I quoted William Colby. I just saw this quote from William Colby, who was the director of the CIA for about, I think it was 3 years during Carter. Am I right? Or was it George Bush Sr.? I can't remember. But anyway, he said one of his famous quotes is that we have the entirety of the American news media in our pocket. And that's right, they do. So sometimes you see some ridiculous story and it's almost always in a left-wing publication, because those are the only people that seem to fall for this shit, about something or another. You can actually assume that somebody's getting paid to write that, and not from their employer. So why did the UFO thing go unreported? Because people were paid not to report it. That's why. That's the primary reason I can come up with. That, and the fact that the government did a really good job ridiculing the whole topic. That too. I mean, the people who did write about it usually wrote about it with a snicker and a jest, And so you're looking at the screen on your phone and wondering, well, Jim, why are you talking about this? Because the entirety of the mainstream media and the government collusion all runs in the same area. It's not now just UFOs. I mean, one of my fascinations here isn't just the fact that maybe we're being visited by extraterrestrials. Matter of fact, it goes way beyond that. Now it's how the government's covered this up, and the fact that they basically use the same tactics to cover up other shit. So now, I don't know if you've been following this. So yesterday, obviously Trump blew out the Iowa caucuses yesterday. And if you turn on some of the mainstream left-wing media, first of all, MSNBC refused to carry his victory speech, because they said, look, we've thought about, Rachel Maddow actually looked in the camera and said, "Look, we've thought about this a lot, and we don't take this lightly, but we refuse to put lies on our television network." Oh yeah, okay. And then, ladies and gentlemen, here's Adam Schiff. It's like, what the fuck? Well, you don't put lies on? Oh yeah, you put lies on all the time, but no, you won't put Trump's lies on. That's the thing, you know. And so, in CNN basically did the same thing. They talked over his speech because they said that Trump was now talking about anti-immigration. No, he's talking about anti-illegal immigration, and they try to what's the word I'm looking for, collapse the two, and they're completely different subjects. It turns out from the polling last night in Iowa, the primary the economy was not the primary issue. The primary issue was illegal immigration, and people are really, really tired of it. And then CNN talks about the fact that Trump is anti-immigrant. No, he's anti-illegal immigrant. And those are two completely different things. I'm a first generation American. My parents are both immigrants. My parents both got in the country legally. And so you want to listen to my 99-year-old mother go off on illegal immigrants? She's had to stand in line, you know, figuratively speaking. And so she did, she came in the right way. She came in, she waited, she came in the way she was supposed to come in. And so now there's people being dumped at the Texas border, and they're walking across the Rio Grande, and they're getting in for nothing. Not only that, they get a free iPhone, and now they're getting free healthcare from the government too. It's fantastic. It's great. Well, by the end of next year, it might be up to 8 million people that they've let in. That's about well over 2% of the American population, approaching 3. And I don't know if you've noticed how close our elections have been. Geez, I wonder why they did that. Huh. And everyone says this is incompetence. Well, yeah. Now the really funny thing is they started this deliberately. That's pretty obvious. Now it's getting to the point it's getting so out of control they can't control it. They because of their incompetence now they can't control it. So they can't even stop it even if they want to. But the reason I brought all this stuff up is because that's the thing. Everybody's lying to everybody, and that's the part you have to understand. And I that's one of the reasons I do this show. I'm hoping that I can bring a little bit of illumination to some of this stuff. They've been lying about the UFOs. I mean, I want to tell you something. I watched this weekend. There's a 3-part documentary on Tubi of all places. Tubi is owned by Fox, not Fox News, Fox Broadcast Corporation, and it's one of those free over-the-top services. The documentary is called UFO Revolution, and I assume it was made by Jeremy Corbell, the filmmaker and UFO investigator, because he's kind of the primary person featured on it, and I kind of think it looked like he made it. But the thing is, if you don't know anything about the subject or not well versed in it, it's a really good place to start, because he talks about he talks about the constant line, and also he alludes to, and we've talked, Jazz Shaw and I have talked about this on the show. You can go back and listen to his interview last week about the fact that they've got a real problem here, because there's a huge struggle in the Pentagon going on about whether they should actually come clean about the fact that the ETs are here. Now, everyone behind the scenes knows this. It's an open secret at this point. I won't, not that when I say here, not that they're in our society, although that appears to be a possibility, but I don't want to go there because I don't have enough information. There's been people who have talked about the fact that, and this has been rumored for 40 years now, that there's a species of extraterrestrial that looks identical to humans, and so you could be sitting in one next to a restaurant and you never even know, but they're still not from Earth. But I don't want to go there because I don't have enough proof. When I say here, that they're visiting here, that they're flying here. So, and because that's where these spacecraft come from, they crash, and people say, "Well, geez, how could you, when you just fly all across the galaxy and then you get in your crash?" Yeah, because it doesn't matter how advanced your technology is; it's a really, really complex process. We can't do it yet. We might have some ideas of how it's done, but we can't do it. So, but I'm going to make a prediction right now. I won't live to see it, and that is we will be flying faster than the speed of light, or the equivalent, because there's a possibility that reality. My friends say, "Well, no, they're not coming here. You can't fly faster than the speed of light." But and that might be true. There's a possibility that directly we can't do that, but there's ways to get around that, and that's what it looks like they've figured out. There's loopholes in the theory of relativity, and so, but we'll be doing that stuff before the end of the century. My guess is we'll be doing it before 2070 is my guess. In the canon of the alternate universe of Star Trek, it was 2050, and that might be actually we might make that. I mean, that might happen. That's about 25 years from now. So yeah, but now I'm just talking. Yeah, well, so yeah, that's the thing. The Pentagon's been covering this up. It's an open secret that these machines are from other planets. At least some of them are. There's a big debate on whether, and I think some of these things are ours that we've reverse engineered. There's two theories to that. I've heard that that's true, and I've also heard that the other reason they don't want to make this public is because they've been trying to reverse engineer this technology and have completely failed at it. In other words, that your military, not, and I'm not even talking about the government here. Your military does not want you, the public, to know that they simply are completely powerless against this shit. I mean, yeah, and I understand that. That's kind of, that's not, we have a military for a reason. And if the military throws their hands to, well, we don't know what's going on, and we don't know how to, it's plenty obvious if they'd wanted to attack us, it would happen already. Matter of fact, I'm assuming they could probably kill every single thing on Earth in a half an hour or something like that. We wouldn't even know. We'd all just be vaporized. So yeah, watch this interview with David Strom here, because we talk about this stuff, and also the interview I did with Jazz Shaw too. He is the UFO guy for Salem Media. I mean, he not only for Hot Air, but for the entire property, Salem Media Properties. He's the go-to guy there, and he writes about this. And yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on. I'll leave you with this. There's a whole bunch of rumors going on in the UFO and military communities that's in 2028 something's going to happen. Now, and I do not know what that is, and I don't know why it's that date. But people under oath, people of security clearances have told investigators that yeah, in 2028 something's going to happen. So there you go. 4 years from now. So, at any rate, folks, I want to thank you for listening. And also we're going to do a little commercial here, but I'm starting to realize this is not a commercial. I just want to show you something here. This is, God dang it! Every time I do this, it 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 screws up. There we go. This is the front page of Calling News as of about half an hour ago, about 9:30 Central Time before I went on. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. You can't see my cursor. Here's an interesting article. This is from the New York Post. It's not over yet. Here's how Trump could still lose the GOP primary. Any rate, my point, if you go to Calling News, this front page takes articles from 75 different news sources, mixes them up chronologically, and then posts them every 3 hours. So you can come back here, you come in the morning, if you come back in the afternoon, it can be completely different. It usually is. You got your news source right here, and you got an interesting. Oh, you know something? Let's actually comment on this for a second. You have an interesting um, uh, cartoon here, editorial cartoon. Neocon and 3-inch heels. Of course, you're talking about Nikki Haley. I'm really kind of fascinated about how she has become, for better or worse, the quote unquote establishment candidate. And I'm starting to wonder if some of this is projection. Some of it does appear to be real. She does appear to actually mimic some traditional or establishment GOP positions. But I do wonder if some of it's just kind of been projected on her too. I don't know. You can call me and tell me I'm nuts. And you can also, you can also send me a text here, and if you the interview with David Strom is pre-recorded, but if you want to comment on it, you can send me a text at 408-458-5088, this number at the bottom of the screen here, and well, I'll read them at the end of the show after the interview's done. So anyway, Conk News, that's at conk.com, CONK.com. So we got that going on. So without further ado, I'm going to press some buttons here. You get to run the 12-second bumper, and then we'll air. This is David Strom. Here we go. Joining us from his home, from the second floor bedroom of his home in North Minneapolis, the scourge of Carleton College and the associate editor of HotAir.com, David Strom. Hi, David. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Jim. How about you?
Well, we got to talk about the weather because we're both here in Minneapolis. It sucks.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's so funny. Generally, the hot air writers, we keep in touch in direct messages on Twitter.
Yeah.
And the other day, somebody, I think it might have been Ed in Texas, was talking about how cold it was down there. And then Beej, who's in Tallahassee, was, oh, it got cold here. And I said, well, it's -6 here. And everyone started laughing.
That's because for those people who don't know, when it gets below 0, it doesn't matter what the number is. It's just fucking awful.
Yeah. The classic way that people who are bitching about it describe it as, I go outside, my face hurts.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And hey, forgive me. Ed used to live here, right?
He did. And so he's quite well aware of it. He's not a native, but he lived here for quite a while. And now he's down in Texas. And things did get cold in Texas. Not Minnesota cold, but they got below freezing by a decent amount.
Oh, yeah. That's pretty cold for them.
Yeah. And they rely, you wouldn't think so, but Texas relies an awful lot on renewable energy that becomes even more unreliable when it gets cold. The big disaster a few years back where the grid collapse was caused by relying a lot on wind power. And so there was a big concern that would happen again.
All right. So let me ask you, is all government slated to eventually become liberal? I mean, it's Texas, and they got oil, and that's what they do, and that's their thing. And so they put up the fucking windmills. And don't get me started on this, David. When it comes to renewables, the windmills are the worst. It's a stupid idea.
Well,
it's stupid.
Answering your first question and then going on to the second rant, the answer is yes. Any institution that is not explicitly conservative will become liberal over time.
So why?
I think a lot of it has to do with capture over time. If you look at, say, the nonprofits, the foundations that are out there, who goes into those foundations? Well, it's going to be highly educated people who want to be in nonprofits, just like in government. They're interested in doing things, and liberalism is all about, messing around with stuff. And ruling people's lives and making things better. And so it becomes a fairly natural phenomenon. Even corporations, as you've seen, experience this. And ironically, if you look at the corporations, the takeover happened through human resources and government relations, which again are driven by the liberal artsy types. And so you have these institutions. I mean, business is supposedly all about, making money, profit, but personnel is policy, and you hand it over, your personnel management to people who are hostile to, anything having to do with freedom, profit motives.
And that's that's the irony. You're working for a profit-making corporation, and you got people who are basically against profit motive. I find this amazing.
Yeah, during the gay marriage fight here in Minnesota, it was a few major corporations that really helped turn the tide for, we were the first state that rejected a ban on gay marriage by vote. And it was basically the large corporations that poured a ton of money into that. And if you look, their government relations folks helped lead the charge on that. And they were gay liberal arts types. And the corporation hired these people. They were highly credentialed, very smart people who were totally useless in business. But, it's like, well, we can have them over in government relations and our foundations. They're interested in this stuff. We're not. We just want to do our thing. And what happens is they just sort of take over from within. And wherever you are on the gay marriage issue, it doesn't make sense for a cereal company to be
No,
involved.
no, it doesn't.
So, I mean, you could even make an argument for Target, where it's a branding thing and they're all about, our involvement in the community. I mean, it's mostly BS, but you could make that argument.
Yeah.
But why exactly? Who is it? Is it General Mills that's here, or one of the big agriculture companies or food manufacturing companies is based here? And they were probably the most involved in this, and it just had to do with the fact that they had hired these sort of liberal arts majors for these key positions having to do with government policy. You add to that the fact that the left has been, since the 1960s, focused on taking over these institutions. So, I mean, that's been their strategy. Take over the public schools, take over the foundations, take over academia.
But yes, you're absolutely right. But when it comes to the for-profit making corporations, that actually becomes an oxymoron, kind of. That's the thing. That's the fun thing I find hilarious about this.
Yes, but they've been pushing in this direction for a very long time. You've got the ESG folks, where you've got actual investors pouring trillions of dollars into explicitly left-wing investments and actually raiding corporations. So, I mean, you get the Human Rights Campaign, which is sort of the alphabet ideology mavens. They rate corporations, and the corporations care deeply about these ratings for whatever reason. Some of it has to do with access to capital, and some of it just has to do with, again, the personnel as policy. I mean, go into any HR department, it's going to be 95% liberal white women.
Oh yeah, I know that. Yeah. Well, I essentially ran a nonprofit corporation years ago for 10 years. And it's amazing when I found out. I remember talking to another leader of a nonprofit organization, and she said we should start a support group, because if you're in a for-profit company and you're on the board, basically generally everybody knows why you're there. You're there to make money. You might disagree on how to do it, and you're right. You might have some, treating the employees, all this sort of stuff. But the goal, everyone understands the goal. When it comes to a nonprofit corporation, you have people who join the board because it's their mission to change society. Well, what the fuck does that mean?
Well, it's funny. My dad once he retired from astronomy, has gotten very deeply interested in how to deal with environmental issues in such a way that you don't get the environmental goals against the economic interests of the people who live in an area. I
Yeah.
mean, he spent the last 50 years in the West, where the government owns pretty much everything, and you've got ranchers and miners and all of these people, and so you've got all the environmentalists who want to put those guys out of business. And my dad figured out that this is counterproductive. That you've got to find a way to, if not make everybody happy, make everybody less unhappy than they otherwise would be. And one of the things he's learned in this process is all these nonprofits are actually in competition with each other for becoming more radical, because they're in competition with each other for donor dollars. And so rather than working together towards the goal that they claim to be working towards, it's all about self-perpetuation.
Yeah.
And I understand this. I too have run a nonprofit. You got to raise the money in order to do your other work, but there's a point beyond which you're not even doing the work anymore.
Right. Well, I can tell you, after it's been 20 years, the organization I ran is now basically unrecognizable.
Yeah.
After 20 years of that. Right.
Yeah. I noticed this very quickly, that nonprofits who you would think would be, very happy to work with, the group I was working with, the Taxpayers League, were totally uninterested in it because they were afraid we were going to poach their donors. And that's a reasonable thing to worry about, because you got to, if you're leading an organization, you've got to make sure that it's around. On the other hand, if you're looking from the outside and asking, what are you accomplishing? You are looking for something totally different than the person running that organization. Accomplishing things is your secondary goal. In fact, lobbyists are often the same way. A friend of mine worked for the legislature for years, and after a change in who was in power, he struck out to become a lobbyist, and he worked on several issues and accomplished the goals of his clients. And then he didn't have any clients because they had accomplished their goal. And so he was talking to another lobbyist. It's like, well, how do you survive in this business? And he said, never get it all.
Yeah. Right. It's the same reason Yasser Arafat wouldn't take Bill Clinton's offer of Palestine. If I take it, I'm out of business.
Oh yeah, no. Look, if you're in the Palestinian Authority, or for that matter, Hamas, you want this conflict to go on forever.
Forever. That's right.
You have a gravy train, billions of dollars. I mean, Hamas, the leaders of Hamas are billionaires, and that's all money that's been flowing in, both in terms of aid and money from Iran and other places that want them to go and kill Jews. And so they want that conflict to go on forever. It's
absolutely. And it's astonishing how so many people in the public don't realize this. That's what I find too.
Yeah. Well, it strikes them as counterintuitive, just as if you look in the United States, you and I would look and see how often we've been lied to by the media, by government. And yet when we talk to sort of normal people, they're like, well, they made a mistake. Their intentions were good. They come up with all sorts of explanations because it's very uncomfortable to realize that the people who you count on, to sort of keep the world running and inform you of how it's working are really evil. Uh, you know, Sometimes it's evil in intentions, like Hamas, but sometimes it's just sort of they've fallen into evil because they're protecting themselves, or they're feathering their nest, or they really don't see their interests as aligned with yours. Uh, and so I was talking to a very smart person to whom I'm pretty close, and we were talking about censorship and Twitter, and you know, she understood that it really wasn't right that the government was censoring things, but then she turned around and said, "Well, I don't want Elon Musk running it either." And it was based on the idea that people who she didn't like, just different people who she didn't like, would be allowed to talk. And um, there's just sort of this hope that someone is going to run the world for our benefit. And the answer is very few people actually are altruistic. Um, I just wrote a piece actually on Francis Collins in COVID.
Uh-huh.
Francis Collins was Anthony Fauci's nominal boss. He ran
Yeah.
the National Institutes of Health and was one of the people who ran interference on the lab leak theory. It's not true. It's a dangerous conspiracy theory. It's xenophobic. I mean, you remember everything they
Oh
were saying.
yeah, Jesus. Yeah.
And he testified before Congress, and he admitted, well, actually, it's very plausible. It certainly could have happened, and there's a lot of reason to believe that it did happen. And you have to ask yourself, so why was he saying all these false things? Well, it's because they were covering their asses. They funded the Wuhan lab. And so it was just easier for them to attack everyone who was telling what was almost certainly the truth and certainly was worthy of discussion. And they did it in their own mind. It had nothing to do with evil. It's just like, well, the National Institutes of Health needs to have people's trust. And so even if we screwed up, we can't admit that, because then we're going to lose credibility, and they need us to be credible, and they tell themselves a story.
Yes, but there's another thing with that too, and that is, so they lie, and then they don't think they're going to get caught lying.
Yes.
Because if you get caught lying, then you've blown your cover anyway. This is the part I don't understand. Is like, did that occur to you? But I suppose you don't think you're going to get caught lying. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing as people who embezzle. They start off doing a little, and then a little more, and then a
Right.
little more. And then they also, and this is not irrational, they expect the media to cover for them. They're
Yeah,
all
that's
part of
true.
the same class.
Right.
And so, I mean, Anthony Fauci arguably should be in jail
Yeah.
for having committed fraud. I don't know about Francis Collins and Rochelle Walensky. Both of them participated in what amounted to a bureaucratic conspiracy. But I think Fauci actually just flat out committed fraud.
Yeah,
And
I agree with you. And I have to say, David, I stood up for this guy for months. I
yeah,
mean, I thought, well, he's saying, that he's just talking about scientific matters, and there's nothing political about his job. And it took me forever to catch on to his grift. It really did. I'm kind of embarrassed by it, but
well, we have lived in a very high social trust society, and very high social trust societies also tend to be the best societies. I mean, there's a reason why the United States has become at least until recently, the freest, most powerful, most wealthy society in the world. A lot of it is built on social trust.
For sure.
Capitalism is built on social trust. I mean,
Absolutely.
everybody says caveat emptor and all of that, but I mean, when you order something from Amazon, you expect it to show up,
Yeah.
and you expect it to meet at least minimum quality standards.
Right.
And whereas in China, I mean, they'll put melamine into milk,
Yeah.
and so we have grown used to being able to trust people, and to a great extent, we've always trusted people more than they probably deserve it, because all human beings are fallen. But it's worked very well for us for a
Yeah.
very long time.
A fantastic example is banks. The
Yeah,
vast majority of people and companies pay their loans back, almost all of them,
yeah,
and it's the loan process in banking that basically creates money,
yeah.
so the thing is, so we're really totally dependent on that, but for hundreds of years it's worked out okay. The vast majority of people pay it back.
Yeah, well, think about international trade prior to the last 50 or 100 years. It was a leap of faith. And, back when America was founded, it was mainly governments and corporations that were essentially monopolies that could do international trade. And
Yeah.
then, what happened when international trade started really exploding, it started with the Quakers, because the Quakers trusted that a Quaker, that was months away across on a different continent, would actually be trustworthy enough to send them what they said they were going to send,
Right.
and vice versa.
Yeah.
And the explosion of wealth that comes from capitalism is entirely based upon trust.
Totally.
And we don't even think about it. And
No.
so it's not irrational that many people started out the pandemic giving basic levels of trust.
Yeah.
Particularly, I mean, these are people in white coats, they're technocrats. Why would they lie? And what they did is has just been I don't know that it's a death blow to our society. That's probably too strong a word. But the decline of the mainstream media and the decline of our expert class and academic class has been a body blow to the United States of America. And you see that in our politics. I mean, left and right hate each other. And it explains why a lot of people, when you ask them, why are you going to vote for Trump? They want to get revenge.
Well, can I, there's another side to this though, too. In some ways, it may be a good thing because it's woken a lot of people up. I
Yep.
mean, the thing is, we've had government lying to us for 70 years through their teeth, and people generally didn't want to buy it. I've never actually asked you this. I mean, I'm assuming you've been you've been a lifelong writer, but how long have you been writing conservative analysis?
For pay?
Yeah.
2 years.
Oh, okay. All right. So now I started working for Conk News 3 years ago. And the thing I had two basically kind of like evolutions of thought. I slowly became over the course of 10 years from a liberal to conservative. And then I got this job working for Conk News. And the thing that astonished me after getting into this business for a very short period of time is that I was astonished by how much fucking lying is going on everywhere. I mean, like you were talking about the normies. If I told my friends the stuff I know, and half the time, I'm in this UFO shit, and half the time when I do, they just roll their eyes. Oh, Jim, that's just bullshit. We've talked about this before. We both living in Minneapolis. We live in a very liberal world here. It's one of the most liberal cities in America, and people just don't. I don't bother to tell people even. So was it? So so I assume you kind of had the same awakening I
Oh,
did, or
absolutely. I mean, I was, becoming, I've worked in conservative politics now for 30 years, and I thought I had grown somewhat cynical. But over the past 4 or 5 years, because how I started working on Hot Air. I mean, I just was sort of spewing out my opinions on Facebook and developed a little bit of a following, and it just sort of naturally moved in this direction. Uh, but just the more and it doesn't take a lot of digging. In fact, I just wrote a piece about the world, the World Economic Forum.
yeah,
The World Economic Forum, the really amazing thing about them, you talk to Normie and they're going to say, "Oh, this is just a conspiracy theory." Da, da. It's like, no, just go to their website. They'll tell you. It's when you talk about like eating bugs, it's like they have page after page after
yeah,
page about why
right,
people eat bugs.
right. No, they're not trying to keep it secret at all.
Oh, because they think they're right, and it sounds right to the transnational elite who really never talk to normal people. And they also just think they're credentialists. They think, well, I went to a great school and you didn't, so sit down, shut up, and do what I tell you.
Yeah,
And their theme for this year, they call it regaining trust, because they're aware that the elite has lost a lot of trust. But it's all about censorship. That's really what they mean by regaining trust, which is getting even more stringent controls on information, because the more people can see things and discuss it, it's like, well, I don't know, I kind of like my steaks and I don't want to eat crickets. But just yesterday, and again, this was what I wrote about, there was a guy up there explaining how they're developing tools, and it was tied to climate change, your
well,
CO2.
don't get me
But
started on that. Go
uh,
ahead.
his we're building software tools that will track what you eat, where you go, who you talk to, how much you travel, and he's putting it all in terms of, this is going to be great because people can see their carbon footprint. And it's like, you're monitoring literally everything I do.
Yeah,
And to them, that's utopia. I mean, it's a dystopia that they're trying to build, but it's perfect for them. They're going to know everything you do, everything you say. And if they don't like it, they'll just squeeze down on you.
well,
And
I'm assuming you may more or less agree to me on this, but one of my missions through this show I do is to try to convince the public that climate change is complete and utter bullshit. And the thing is, like all liberal lies, there's a kernel of truth to it. The world is warming up. I know no scientist that disputes that. It's been warming up for 300 years. But the problem is, do humans have anything to do with it? Little, if any. And
yeah,
this,
the kernel of truth is exactly right, because the basic argument that CO2 is a greenhouse gas is correct. That's true. And CO2 has been going up. It may have some modest being tiny impact on worldwide temperatures, but what they're saying is hottest it's ever been. The globe is boiling. We're all going to die. It's all crap. I mean, it's beyond crap. I mean, the people have no idea. We're still at relatively low levels of CO2 in
yeah,
terms
that's
of
right. We
world history.
are. It's actually, we need more, really, not
Yeah,
less. And
yeah,
also, the other thing about they've equated CO2 with pollution, and nothing can be further from the truth.
yeah. I mean, if you get CO2 levels, most people don't know this. I mean, the CO2 level is
Oh, that's
0.0004%.
impressive. You know the number.
Well, I just wrote about this.
Oh,
So, so it's 99.9996% of the atmosphere is not CO2.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and CO2 is a greenhouse gas, but it's not actually the primary greenhouse gas. That's water vapor.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, uh, and so I was watching yesterday a physicist on YouTube, who's not a global warming alarmist, and she's not like a total skeptic. And but she was just driven nuts because she read a scientific paper that made the claim that we were about to have a runaway greenhouse gas event that would turn us into Venus, which has an atmospheric temperature of about 700 or 800 degrees
Right.
Fahrenheit.
Mm-hmm.
And she just looked at this and said, "This is total crap."
Yeah.
It's literally not possible for this to happen. And during the age of the dinosaurs, I think CO2 levels were about 1,500 parts per million.
Yeah, much higher. Right.
Yeah, more than 3 times higher. Go into a greenhouse and they pump CO2 in there because plants grow. They take the carbon out of the atmosphere. Most of the mass of that plant did not come from the ground. We think it came from the ground. No, it actually got sucked out of the atmosphere,
Mm-hmm.
the carbon, and it releases oxygen.
Right.
It splits the carbon dioxide. And so it works as a fertilizer. The plants will grow faster because, well, they have access to carbon.
That's right. Yeah. And that's
So,
why they pump it in.
yeah. I mean, and so one of the things that's so frustrating, and in fact, you see this throughout all our discourse. One of the things that the establishment and the left does is take a tiny kernel of truth and then turn it into the most extreme thing possible.
Right. That's right. It's a standard formula now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The insurrection. It's like there was a riot at the Capitol.
Yeah, there was a riot at the Capitol. Right. That's right.
It's like, yeah, well, I mean, it's bad, but people are going to jail for 20 years.
Yes. Yeah.
And pretty much the only people who had weapons were
the Capitol Police.
The Capitol Police.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the most heavily armed group of people, aside from an army, in the world, right? Trump supporters.
Yeah.
I mean, there are literally 300 million guns in the United States.
That's right. And there weren't any there.
There weren't any there. So it's like, that ain't an insurrection. If they wanted to take over the government, they probably would have showed up with weapons.
Yeah.
It was bad. People did stupid things, but we've had years now. We're going into our 4th year of talking about this. And it's just absurd. It's insane. But this is what the left does, is takes the little kernel that we can all agree on and blows it up into the most ridiculous thing. And people just sort of go, well, maybe it wasn't exactly an insurrection, but it really was bad. People have talked about it for 4 years. So
right. Hey, let me ask you something. I had Mark Morano on the show. I'm backing up a little bit here. He's a climate change guy, So I asked him, I want to ask you too. So when John Kerry and Al Gore go on and on about this bullshit, do you think it's because they truly personally believe this stuff, or they're saying this because they think they can manipulate the public?
Throw up my cat.
That's another one.
Yes. I'm pretty sure that Al Gore at least started out believing it. John Kerry is so fundamentally stupid.
Yes, he is. Isn't he?
That
I'm so glad you said that.
That is perfectly plausible. In fact, I wrote a piece, and I think it was in my Sunday Smiles column, uh, but about how midwits are
Oh yeah,
running the.
it was Sunday because I read that religiously every Sunday. Yeah.
Uh, and John Kerry is your absolutely classic midwit, someone who is grossly overeducated, thinks incredibly highly of themselves, and is about of average intelligence. He's probably somewhere between IQ of 100 and 110.
Right. Yeah.
You
Uh-huh.
know, not stupid, not retarded, but he should be nowhere near any kind of debate about science or anything else. So, he's a midwit.
Yeah.
Uh, and
As far
Al
as I
Gore,
can tell, his primary talents are marrying rich women. That's his,
yeah,
that's what he's good at.
Al Gore is probably somewhere, and IQ doesn't tell you everything, and it certainly doesn't tell you who ought to be in charge. But Al Gore is somewhere between 115 to 125 IQ, probably on the low end of that.
Uh-huh.
Uh, he's smarter than John Kerry. I think he's been, at least early on, was persuaded, by these scientists. Now it's probably, partly or mostly a grift, or at the very least, he's committed himself to a path. And even if he has doubts, that's where he's going.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But Kerry is just too stupid to even think about it. You couldn't have an intellectual argument with John Kerry.
No, he'll just get on his private jet and fly away.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you
He's
could
not going
have
to talk to you.
and I am not at all an admirer of Al Gore, never was, but I don't think that he's an idiot. He's just not nearly as smart as he thinks he is.
Yeah.
And I think he'd made his decision and now is doing, sophistry.
Yeah. You wrote a column a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, and I think it was called some. Hold on, just a minute. Let me actually look because I actually put this down here. Hold on a second. It was called "You and I Live in a Different Universe from Democrats," and I mean this really struck me because I thought you so cogently made this argument about basically what's going on here, and what you said is going on is, and you're not alone. There's a lot. Basically, every study ever done on this has said conservatives are basically more well informed than liberals. But you nailed what I thought is the reason, and that is because we live in a liberal world, and liberals can't get away from it. And conservatives, we're forced to deal with this shit. We have to listen to your bullshit, so we kind of get both sides of it, and they don't. I just thought that was
Yeah.
that's the reason you write, and I just gab.
Well, everybody has different skill sets. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a reason why there's a division of labor in the world. Um, you know, it's fundamental to the way that we work is we don't think about most things most of the time.
Uh-huh.
And for obvious reasons. I think I put in that column that I've never personally been to the moon. I've never personally been to Paris, and yet, the moon I can see, but Paris, I've just seen, flat screens, and people tell
Uh-huh.
me about it, and but how do I know it's not, AI generated or anything?
Yeah,
Well,
that's really that's a wonderful analogy. The moon's farther away, but you've seen that.
yeah. Uh, as a practical matter, common sense stuff is built on trust. Again, getting back to that, common sense is, well, what we've done is we've pooled our knowledge, and, it's imperfect, and we know that some things are more accurate than others, but it's good enough to get through the world day by day. Now, so if you're a liberal, you've got all this stuff pouring at you, reinforcing your prejudices. And all of us have prejudices, but it's all consistent. There's this consistent narrative. There is, perfect example is my dad, who, grew up in the 40s and 50s, and he still has this notion that all Southerners are lynching bubbas who are too stupid. He hears a Southern accent, and I mean, he once sent me an email where he was at a doctor's office for a scan, and he was sitting next to this woman who had a Southern accent, and he said she actually turned out to be really nice and pretty smart.
Hey,
This was
David,
like,
I gotta make an admission. That was my last prejudice. I still remember the very first time I ever heard Bill Clinton talk, and I'm thinking, what a fucking idiot. And of course,
yeah,
a couple of years later, I realized, no, I'm wrong. And it's like, he's not. And yeah, I know that was my great prejudice too. I hear a Southern accent and I think stupid right away.
yeah, no, and that's not atypical, and it's based upon the fact that you grow up in the North, and that's everyone thinks that, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're a conservative, uh, you're living in that same narrative, but you're looking around and saying, well, this isn't true. Or at least this does not accord with my own sense of how things work. And so you're forced to think about stuff a lot more.
Uh-huh.
And one of the websites that I go to, or actually I follow their Twitter feed and read their stuff, is this Skeptic Research Institute. And a lot of what they do is they gather a lot of data, and then they ask people what they think about it. And one of the first things I saw, they did a poll during the George Floyd riots and everything, asking people how many unarmed Black men are shot by police every year.
Yes, I've seen the same poll. Right. Go ahead.
And the Washington Post actually keeps a running
Yes.
tally.
The Washington Post criminal database is the gold standard for this. Right. Right.
And so they asked people, and liberals thought the number, sort of the median was about 1,000 a year. Some, and some substantial number of people thought it was as high as 10,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And if you thought it was as high as 100,000 a year, which would depopulate the Black population.
Yeah, but right.
Within 20 years. And they asked conservatives, and conservatives thought it was, somewhere between 50 and 100.
Right.
The actual number is about 10 to 12 a year.
Yeah.
And so conservatives.
Actually, excuse me, I just want to be totally accurate here for our viewers. It depends on how you word that question, but
Sure.
in no way is it the absolute top number is 40, and it's actually really 32. But yeah, it's depending on how you word it, but because it depends on whether you're talking about unarmed or without a gun, which is actually two different things. But yeah, the thing is, it's basically it's under 30, right? Yeah, whatever. Yeah. So
and then anyway. a lot of those are, they're extenuating circumstances,
right?
Where they for a gun and there was a fight.
Right. Oh, hold on, lost you. Yeah. And also a lot of them are just people with knives and not guns too. So they count that also. So right. Yeah.
So now conservatives weren't perfect on that because, again, I mean, we don't research it, but our sense is, very close to the truth.
Right. It was, the number was much, much closer. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And whereas liberals, it's very far from the truth, sometimes extremely far from the truth. And so why is that? Well, you're bombarded with this all the time, right? There's police are out hunting black men, and there's this black genocide, and look at George Floyd, and da 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 da. And liberals just sort of take it all in, whereas conservatives are, relatively skeptical about this stuff because it's like, well, I'm lied to all the time, and as a practical matter, conservatives on most things tend to have a more accurate sense of how the world works, and a more accurate sense of how liberals think, because we're bombarded with it again. I'm not making any claim that conservatives are smarter or always, more right on an issue. This is just a basic question of, do you know the way that the world
Yeah,
is?
access to information, right? That's right. Right. So,
And
but hold it. Let me ask you though. So, do you think this has now evolved to the point where the liberal media is realizing, well, Jesus, we have a certain base of people we can credibly or reliably lie to, that we're going to keep them misinformed? Do you think it's got to that?
oh, absolutely, which is why they're so. I mean, think about how bizarre it is that uh, the mainstream media is all in on censorship. And there's no question that they are. I mean, you'll have lots of columnists talk about how we've got to, you know, kill misinformation, and they're backing all these government things to do it. And it's entirely based upon the fact that they want to have total control over the narrative. As many people pointed out on social media, uh, uh, the mainstream media didn't carry Trump's acceptance
I was
speech.
just going to ask you about that. That's right. They didn't. Right.
Literally, the guy who won. I mean, this just doesn't happen. Someone wins, and by the largest. And I'm not a Trump supporter. I'll vote
Yeah.
for him, but I'm not a Trump guy. But it is just absurd. The guy who wins by the largest margin ever, and they'll explain to you, well, we're not going to platform this liar.
Yeah.
It's like,
That's right.
we're not going to
Rachel Maddow got on MSNBC and gave a very eloquent speech about how we have really struggled with this, but we just can't put lies on our channel. And of course, they'll run Joe Biden lying through his teeth, But I don't know. So tell me what the difference is. I don't know.
they employ people, who have committed perjury before Congress. Remember the NSA
Oh yeah,
director,
right.
uh, and
Scaramucci.
yeah, I mean, it's just it's not whether it's true or false; it's whether it fits the narrative or not. It
Yeah,
really is that simple. I
yeah,
mean, Fauci has been proven to be a liar, right?
yeah.
Uh, not just wrong, but he has lied at times, and provably lied at times, and they'll put him on. So it's not about lying. It's about whether they want you to tell the story that they want you to believe.
Do you
It's
think
that.
more and more people in the middle, the like undecideds, the unaffiliateds, my impression is more and more people are starting to figure this out. I mean, I don't shouldn't be saying impression because man, the poll, according to
Yeah,
surveys, trust in the mainstream media is at an all-time low. I mean, I don't personally don't understand. I do not read the New York Times anymore. I don't understand why anybody would. I have a lot of friends that do because it's the newspaper of record, you
yeah.
know. And your colleague Jazz Shaw, who writes for UFOs on Salem, on him for 30 years, I've been telling people, the UFOs are real and the government knows it, but it wasn't until it was published in the New York Times that anyone bought it,
Yeah.
So, they're the newspaper of record, so people believe what they say, and it's like that's bullshit because they lie half the time. I don't
Well,
know.
yes, people are waking up, and it means less than you think. It means a lot, but it means less than you think. And I'll give you an example. And this is me. All right, how I
Okay.
was taken in. The Vermont shooter who shot the three Arab
Yeah.
guys. I just assumed it was, they told me it was a hate crime. I assumed it was a hate crime. Didn't hear a lot about it except that, this horrible hate crime, Islamophobia. And
Right.
then this fairly liberal independent media site up in New Hampshire, just sort of looked into the guy and talked to the people. This is months afterwards, right? This was just
Hmm.
published. And he had posted, pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas stuff. Palestinians need a state. He had serious mental health issues. He had restraining orders against him, and he was your sort of classic mentally ill guy who, for some reason, and we don't know what the reason is, but these guys were right in front of his house. All right. So it wasn't like he went out hunting Palestinians. It was probably something like they were yelling. They were too loud. They were young men doing what young men do. He didn't even talk to them. We heard that he shouted, anti-Islamic, blah. No, he just went outside and started shooting them. And so everything about that story, other than the fact that white man shot 3 Arab kids, everything else was false. And it was a narrative that they told, and I bought it, even knowing that most hate crimes that you hear about are bogus.
Yeah.
But I just got sucked in. It's like I didn't decide to look into it. Oh shit, that's horrible. It shouldn't have happened. I don't care whether they're Arabs or not. You just can't go out and shoot people. I mean, it's just
right. And when you wrote that piece, I basically forgot about even the original incident, but I understand where you're coming from. I mean, the thing is, we do this, and then you still wonder, why would anybody lie? It's like, it's just a bullshit crime. Why lie about that? Well, somebody has a reason somewhere,
Well, think about all those statistics about mass shootings. Almost every mass shooting that they put into the statistics are, gangland shootings, drug dealers shooting at each other.
Right.
They're putting it like it's a school shooting.
Right.
No, it's because they won't put these thugs in jail. And they're just conflating things as if, one thing is like the other. Crime and mass murder are 2 different things, and they should not be pushed together, but they're creating a narrative, so they just do it.
So let me ask you, what do you think is going to happen with the election? You got a prediction right now?
Well, I'm going to steal a line from Hugh Hewitt, which is, if you want to win as a Republican, you have to win beyond the margin of cheating. So,
hey, did you see this, David? I can't remember if you wrote about this or not. That's according to the polling in Iowa, 60% of the caucus goers, 68% of them thought the 2020 election was cheated. It's like, Jesus Christ. So there's like 2/3 of the people. I mean, from what I understand, a majority of Democrats still think it was cheated. Like 58% or something like that. I can't remember what the last figure I saw. But
well, I mean, there's no question that the election was rigged.
Yes, right.
The question is, did they manipulate vote totals?
Correct. That's absolutely right. That's right.
Which are 2 different things.
That's right.
There's no question they rigged the election. They censored things. They basically tilted, put their thumbs on the scale to an enormous extent. I mean, Molly Ball wrote a piece for Time magazine, and she put it as, how
they fortified it. She said they fortified it.
Yeah, and she actually said it was a conspiracy.
Yeah.
And it was. I mean, there was a conspiracy. Now, a lot of what that was legal. A lot of it was not legal, and a lot of it was skirting the law. But you had Zuckerbucks. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars where they put private individuals from nonprofits into secretaries of state, and where they were counting votes. And they were harvesting data, they were suppressing things. So the election was rigged. There's no question about that in my mind. Did they cheat on vote totals? And the answer is yes, because that happens in every election. The question is, did they cheat enough to change the outcome?
Right. Was
My,
it consequential? Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
those are two different things. You would have to be insane to believe that people don't cheat in elections. I mean, we have on video. I mean, forget the 2,000 mules and all of that, which people dispute. I mean, we have people going to jail in elections in Connecticut, where you have on video, people stuffing ballot boxes, and
Yeah. I
mayoral
know.
election was overturned and all of that. And you know, winning an election in the United States is one of the most valuable things that exists in the world. I mean, you get control over this enormous military, trillions of dollars, government spending, nuclear weapons. I mean,
Yeah. Somebody explained to me that politics and elections were one of the few places in life where the second place person gets nothing. It's an
yeah,
all or nothing thing.
yeah,
If you're
it's
running Avis and you're competing against Hertz, well, you're still making a shitload of money, you
yeah,
know. But yeah, in politics, the loser gets nothing.
yeah, it's the ultimate tournament, and so
Right.
it would be the only thing on earth that was this valuable that no one tried to cheat to get it. Uh,
Yes.
I mean, think about it. I mean, people go to jail for $10,000.
Uh-huh.
Go to jail for $100.
Yeah.
You know, if you could control 6, 7, $8 trillion, yes, people are going to cheat.
Yeah.
The question is it consequential enough?
Uh-huh.
And I suspect it was. I don't know that it was. I think in 2024, looking forward to the next election, it's a stupid thing to be talking about. You should be figuring out how to win the next one. And if you think they're going to cheat, win it by a big enough margin that the cheating doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, you can only cheat so much. I mean, you
Right.
cannot invent, more people than exist in the United States of America.
Yeah.
Uh, so, uh, you know, as a practical matter, we should be focused on winning elections so that we can secure them. Uh, and I think it's possible. I think it is very possible for Trump to win, simply because Joe Biden is, not only is he barely sentient, uh, but he and his entire administration are grotesquely incompetent. Uh, I mean, think about just simple things like during the midst. I mean, Afghanistan, which is what
Right.
kneecapped him.
Yeah.
But during the supply chain crisis, Pete Buttigieg was, on paternity leave for months as, the country, I mean, you couldn't get baby formula in the country.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of like, well, I have a right to be with my baby. It's like, then, I have no problem with that, go do that. But you can't be transportation secretary in the middle of
Yeah.
a crisis. Lloyd Austin, he disappears when, I mean, we're bombing countries.
This is really fascinating. I just don't understand what's going through his mind. I really don't.
Well, to me, the most interesting question was, how did nobody know? I
Yeah.
mean, it tells you how irrelevant these people actually are in the Biden
Yes.
administration. And it tells you that the people who they tell you are at the top are not in the Biden administration. They're all the deputies who are all Obama people.
Yeah.
So I would love to see someone subpoena phone records of, the sort of second tier people and find out how many phone calls they had with, Obama and Obama people. because, and again, this isn't a conspiracy. I mean, Obama himself said his ideal job was to, be able to set policy without having to do all the other crap, for being president. And I think
Yeah.
that's exactly what he's doing.
Yeah. 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 I know.
So, I mean,
Well,
you saw that video of when Obama visited the White House.
yes.
And everybody was surrounding Obama, and Joe Biden actually tried to get Joe Biden tried to get Obama's attention, put his hand on his arm, tried to pull him, and Obama just completely ignored him.
Yeah. I gotta admit, I thought that was a deliberate snub, and could not have been more disrespectful. I mean, it's like,
It was horrible.
yeah, yeah.
But Obama thinks, well, I'm more important than Joe Biden.
No,
And
he does.
and he may be in Biden's administration.
Yeah.
So
David, we've been talking for an hour.
yeah, and I got to get back to writing.
I know, that's the reason I brought that up. I've kept you way over time, so I really appreciate it. And so after about an hour, my brain starts to burn out. So, so
I have logorrhea. I mean, I can just talk forever.
Well, I can too. Why do you think I do this?
But I have to write. So I've got 3 more pieces. Actually, the piece that I'm in the middle of is on the fact that Britain, in the midst of everything that's going on in Europe, including Germany, the German Defense Ministry, this just got leaked, expects a war in Europe in the next several years, an actual war. And the UK is cutting its army by 10% and mothballing ships.
Well, I got to ask you, though. You got me on another thing here, too. I mean, there are people right now who are literally talking about the fact we're going to be walking into World War III. Not any hypothetical thing, that this whole thing going on in the Middle East. I mean, what do you think about this? Do you think there's some truth to this, or that we're walking into a major war?
We're sleepwalking in foreign policy, and a lot of what is going on, including Ukraine, including what's going on in the Middle East, is related to the weakness of the Biden administration, and in particular, the pullout from Afghanistan. Whatever you think about whether we should have, still been there or anything else, the signal that was sent to people who do not wish us well was the U.S. is in retreat. And I mean, yesterday, Iran sent missiles at the U.S. consulate. Whether it was aimed at the U.S. consulate or not, I think it probably was not directly aimed at them, but they're testing the U.S. They've had their proxies shooting at us. I mean, quite literally shooting at U.S. ships. They just hit a U.S. ship. There have been well over 100 attacks on U.S. troops in the Middle East since October 7th, all of which are Iranian proxies. And now Iran itself shoots missiles into Iraq. And they're basically trying to see whether the U.S. will respond and how they will. And clearly nothing that we have done has deterred them. Their idea is that Joe Biden is weak, and they've been right on that. And the question is, and China is looking at this too. So the question really is there going to be a rubber band effect that gets us into World War III? Where instead of responding very strongly, very quickly, as say Trump did. You remember when Syria crossed the red line, and I forget what it was. He literally sent 100 cruise missiles at a Syrian airfield.
Yeah, you mean Trump did, right?
Yeah, Trump.
Yeah, Trump, right.
And most of them were actually not even aimed at Syrian troops or their aircraft. Some of them were, but most of them actually exploded in exactly the same place uh, uh, on a runway.
Hmm.
But the message was, don't fuck with us.
Right. We can re-aim these.
Yeah.
Right.
And we actually killed Russian Wagner Group troops. One of the missiles went and killed Russian Wagner Group troops. It was also a message to Russia, which was, you're not safe either. And it was deniable for Russia because Wagner Group is not technically Russian military.
Right.
And it was sort of deniable for the United States. Oh, well, we weren't aiming for your guys, but everyone knew we were aiming for their guys. The rubber band effect is, the exact opposite, where you've got your adversary keeps pushing and pushing and pushing that rubber band, and it's all going this way. And at some point, you decide, well, I can't have them go any farther. And so you shoot back the other direction. So you have created a situation that's far more volatile than because deterrence has failed. The only
Yeah.
thing you can do is go into something that approximates a full-scale war. And I don't know whether that's going to happen. But right now, I think what's holding China back is that their military is corrupt, and they're, as they prepare for the invasion of Taiwan, and they keep on saying, we're going to invade Taiwan. What they're discovering is the corruption has made some of their weapons unreliable.
Hmm.
And so, but I don't think they're scared of Joe Biden. And I don't think any of these guys, again, I'm not a huge Trump fan, but I thought Trump was outstanding in foreign policy. I mean, it was remarkable. I mean, you got the Abraham Accords. The United States was perfectly clear about where our red lines were, what we were going to do. It made it very easy to deal with our adversaries because they knew what they could do and get away with. And we pretty much told them, you can get away with this, you can't get away with that. Don't fuck with us. We understand you have certain interests, even legitimate interests, and we're not going to screw with those things, but you screw with ours, and you're going to pay an enormous price. And that's what kept nuclear war from happening. Everyone
Yeah.
knew, you cross the line, it was mutually assured destruction.
And of course, the irony of this is that based on his political experience, that's a thing he should have been the least best at. But I mean, I have a Republican friend of mine who, like you, also doesn't like Trump, and he says the same thing. Outstanding foreign policy. I think it's because Trump understands people.
Exactly.
And he understands these.
It's why he screwed up on COVID so badly. In fact, very early on in March of 2020, and I'm terrible at making predictions. I mean, just remarkably bad. But in March, I predicted that Trump was going to screw up COVID because it was the first time he had an adversary whose head he couldn't get into.
That wasn't human, right? Yeah.
Wasn't human, and he was totally out of his depth. And so he basically handed things over to people who he thought, well, these people know how to deal with this. And It was a total mistake. And I actually saw that coming because by then I'd sort of figured out how Trump works. He's great at negotiating with people, at least to get what he wants. I mean, I think he's been vile during this campaign because he doesn't care about the Republican Party. He just cares about winning, but he knows how to win, and and he's winning now. I mean, he's achieving his goals. And when he was president, his goals were aligned with the country's goals.
Right. Right. And I'm totally with you about the fact, you're right, that he didn't have a human adversary. And unfortunately, he trusted people that normally you should be able to trust. I mean, okay, so he passed the ball, and it was all bullshit. It's terrible.
Well, who would have expected of all the people in the world, public health people would be this mendacious?
Yeah, I know. So same here. Like I told you, like I stood up for Fauci for months and months. I'm stunned, and it's like, yeah, it's like, no, this is bullshit.
Well, I think it really the seed of corruption there was the fact that Fauci funded this, and out of that, every other lie sprung.
Yes,
Uh,
right.
and I think even all the horrible things that they did about shutdowns and everything else, masks and all the mandates and everything, was driven by panic that we really fucked up big time and we've got
Uh-huh.
to clean up this mess, and we don't want to have anyone wrap this around our necks.
Yeah.
And the mainstream media was just fine with that, and the transnational elite was like, this is the greatest thing ever. We can do the reset. So there was just sort of this confluence of interests.
Yeah.
But for the bureaucrats, I think it was simple ass covering.
Yeah, I
uh,
agree.
uh, and I understand that ass covering. I mean, if I had made a mistake that big, I wouldn't want people to know about it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like millions of people died. I don't want that to be my legacy.
No, that's right. That's right. That's right. I'm gonna let you go because
Yes,
this is we're at 70 minutes and you need to work.
I do. I
I'm
do.
really sorry. I mean, we went way over time, but I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. Also, did you notice I basically asked 3 questions?
No, I didn't.
We talked for 70 minutes. We didn't. You don't need questions.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I have logorrhea. I just like.
Yeah, well, that's right. It helps for what I do, so I appreciate it a lot. I can't thank you. I always love talking to you. So I can't wait till the next time. So
All right. Well, I enjoy
okay.
it too.
You take care, man. All right.
All
We'll see
right.
ya. David Strom. Oh my god, I forgot to take him off the screen. There we go. Jesus, it's been 5 months. You'd think I'd figure out how to fucking run this shit after a while. What the hell? A lot of buttons to push, though. I got a 12-second bumper, and I need it bad. That's David Strom. I love that man. He's a hot associate editor of hotair.com. He lives here in town, Minneapolis. His house is only a couple miles from our studio here, and we talked about that off the air. We've never actually met in the flesh, and I keep suggesting we go out and have a drink, and he said, yeah, but let's wait till spring. No one wants to leave the house. I mean, right now, what is it? It's 3 degrees here in Minneapolis. Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. Anyway, the show's done. We're over for tonight. I want to thank you guys for watching. Tomorrow night, we got the At Night dynamic duo, Jennifer Oliver O'Connell from redstate.com, paired with Jeff Meyer from conk.com, from Conk News, and they're our sponsor too. We want to thank them as always. And Thursday, wake the kids. You want to be around for this. Stan Gordon, one of the most well-known UFO investigators in the United States, is joining us. And I'm looking forward to this. We had to book this months ahead of time. And I got to admit, I'm astonished he's doing it. I mean, we're kind of a D level outlet, it's like, and he's an A level guy, but no, he's coming on with us. And I really, really am looking forward to this. It's going to be a lot of fun. That's Thursday night. And next week we got the whole rest of the month's booked up. Yeah, looking forward to talking to a lot of people. So at any rate, I want to thank you folks for watching. Always appreciate it a lot. Good night, Esperanza. Good night, Uncle Donnie. And good night to you, wherever you are. We'll see you tomorrow night. Take care.